On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this edition of the African Union Journal, your weekly rendezvous on news around the African Union. For this edition, we will be looking at unity, economic structuring, and solidarity for sustainable development in Africa. Public debt is rising and budgetary margins are shrinking, faced with a crisis that threatens the future of several countries on the continent. Expert political leaders and financial institutions met in Lomé to consider concrete solutions. How can debt sustainability be restored without sacrificing essential social spending? What mechanisms are needed to better structure borrowing and strengthen economic sovereignty? Details with Nana Kamsukam.
Public debt in Africa is now reaching worrying levels. According to the International Debt Report published in 2024 by the World Bank, 22 African countries are over-indebted or exposed to high risks. In 2023, the cumulative public debt of sub-Saharan Africa exceeded the $1,100 billion mark, or more than 60% of regional GDP. A large proportion of these debts is contracted with private or bilateral creditors with high interest rates and strict conditions. This fragility is not the result of a single factor, but of a chain of structural and cyclical vulnerabilities.
Many have had these funds, but have not been able to use them effectively. But ultimately, when you go to these countries, there's no infrastructure, there's no road infrastructure, there is no energy. There's nothing.
In several sub-Saharan African countries, debt services absorbed colossal resources. According to the International Monetary Fund, by 2023, Ghana will be devoting more than 45% of its public revenue to debt servicing, or around $6.2 billion a year. In Ethiopia, debt repayment amounts to almost $3.5 billion, while the combined health and education budget is barely $2.7 billion. More generally, in 14 African countries, the amounts paid to creditors exceed basic social budgets.
Debt sustainability is the issue where is being caused by this very issue. So one, debt service has now overtaken in some instances spending on health, spending on education, and these are critical to any development of any country.
Faced with the urgency of debt, the Lomé Conference put forward concrete solutions. The experts called for strengthening of African development banks, such as the African Development Bank, which granted almost $8 billion in 2023 on favorable terms. Among the instruments mentioned were green bonds, loans linked to the SGDs, and debt for nature swaps. As in the case with Seychelles, where $27 million was redirected towards marine protection, but without transparency and rigorous governance, these tools remain insufficient.
If the terms and conditions of the borrowing is also not crippling to the country, it's also fine. If the resources are not leaked in terms of the fact that it ends up in people's pocket by way of corruption, it's also good. So the important thing is that each country has its own capacity.
Debt is not inevitable. If it is properly contracted and channeled into productive investment, it can become a real lever for growth.
Faced with heavy debt burden weighing on their economies, African countries are making strategic shifts. The continent is exploring innovative financing mechanisms to regain its economic sovereignty. At the African Union Conference on Debt in Lomé, a new collective ambition was set. Ruth Musi tells us more.
Lomé, capital of Togo, hosted from the 12th to the 14th of May 2025, the first African Union Conference on Public Debt. The event brought together financial experts who drew up a detailed diagnosis of the situation and suggested innovative financing solutions. The results are worrying. In 2024, Africa's public debt reached €1,860 billion. In less than a decade, The average debt to GDP ratio has risen from 44.4% to 66.7%. The International Monetary Fund reports that 22 African nations are over-indebted. Faced with this reality, the continent needs to reassess its budgetary priorities.
L'idée principale, c'est d'avoir une bonne gestion de son endettement.
The main idea is to manage debt in a way that ensures its viability, sustainability, cost and solidity. And of course, countries need to organize themselves so that they have a transparent entity to manage this debt and institutions to control it and monitor its progress.
Avoir des institutions qui vont contrôler cette dette.
Today, less than 40% of African countries publish detailed reports on their debt. This lack of transparency exacerbates the risk imposed by international rating agencies. Faced with this situation, the African Union is suggesting a sovereign response, a Pan-African credit rating agency designed to re-establish a fairer assessment of African economies.
Au niveau régional, il est important qu'il y ait une collaboration.
At the African level, it's important to work together because we can see that the challenge is very great in terms of supporting countries. It's also important that we get together to help them better because we don't have all the human and financial resources to act. But if we pool our human resources and financial resources together, we can be more effective and duplicate the efficiencies in terms of our support for the countries that need it. In 2024, African countries will have spent almost $90 billion on debt servicing, almost double the foreign aid received and more than the combined annual health and education budgets of many countries. The continent also has an infrastructure deficit estimated at between $130 and $170 billion a year, while access to a long-term financing remains out of reach. Faced with this, the African Union is calling for an equitable reallocation of special drawing rights, over 85% of which remain concentrated in G20 countries.
I am convinced that we should start with the Africa Monetary Fund because that is going to speak directly to the macroeconomic stability. And we believe once we have fixed that, once we have fixed all these instabilities and be it debt or other, we can think of moving on to the investment, that indicating that we need Africa investment.
In the short term, African nations are committed to improving their internal practices by combating illegal financial flows, rigorous budget management, and better mobilization of their own resources. In the long term, the African Monetary Institute project, 2 decades in the making, is back on the agenda. The aim is to build a continental financial structure capable of supporting investment without recourse to external markets.
At his first official press briefing on May 12, 2025, Mahmoud Ali Youssuff, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, presented the new leadership's main priorities, stressing the importance of promoting peace and security, fostering continental integration, and mobilizing national resources to finance Africa's development. A report by Catherine Gobe.
Highlighting Africa's complex peace and security challenges, the chairperson of the EU Commission, Mahmoud Ali Youssuff, on May 12, 2025 in Addis Ababa, outlined the initiatives on the way to find lasting solutions to the security situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, peace and stability in Somalia, escalating tensions in South Sudan, and the continuing conflict in Sudan. For the leader, it is more than necessary to review the institution's security architecture in order to prevent unresolved conflicts.
We are in the process of revisiting our peace and security architecture. We think that we have a number of mechanisms, within this peace and security architecture. One of them is the Peace and Security Council. I think we are working on the reforms through our Department of Political Affairs with member countries to see how we can make this Peace and Security Council organ, it is a policy organ, more efficient. When they make decisions, those decisions have to be implemented. And sometimes they still remain ink on the paper. So we need to see how we can revisit. Then we have this continental, the continental alerte rapide, early warning system, the continental early warning system. This continental early warning system is a unit that is supposed to work, on prevention, 24/7. There's a need also to see how this unit functions, because prevention is key.
Mahmoud Ali Youssuff also indicated that the priorities of his leadership during his 4-year term are aligned with the urgent need to accelerate the implementation of the key aspirations of the second 10-year plan of Agenda 2063, the Continental's Bloc's 50-year development plan. He also emphasized the urgent need to make Africa's role in the global trade a key priority for his leadership, expressing the AU's ambition to leverage the G20 mechanism as a crucial platform for enhancing the continent's role in global trade.
Agenda 2063 has been adopted in 2023, and then by 2063, we should reach the goal of having a peaceful, prosperous, and integrated Africa. It won't be done overnight. It will take time. We know that the outcome or the achievements of the first 10-year plan was not that satisfactory. The figures are that we have received through the report is 37% of achievement of execution. So it's up to the new commission to improve that level of execution, that level of implementation of the second 10-year plan, which has been adopted in 2024. So when you speak about the second 10-year plan, you have so many important sectors, mechanisms. One of those flagship programs, there are 15, is silencing the guns by 2030. So this is also one of the top.
At the heart of the reform program announced is the AU's financial autonomy by reducing its dependence on external funding through the exploration of innovative financial mechanisms. The AU has, for example, received 600 million euros from the European Union between 2022 and 2024 for peacekeeping aid.
Reforms are also on the financial aspect. With the change in international geopolitics, the orientation we would like to give to our action when it comes to mobilizing financial resources to our organization is first and foremost rely on our domestic resources, and then continue to engage new partners so that we can mobilize resources for development, for peace and security.
In addition to strengthening the administrative and financial management of the EU Commission, in order to establish a culture of efficiency, transparency, and accountability at all levels, Mahmoud Ali Youssuff has pledged to promote the principle of Pan-Africanism and African unity.
On to our regional news. The UN, the AU, and the Arab League are calling for a lasting ceasefire amid the crisis in Sudan. ECOWAS validates its labor migration strategy, which aims to enhance regional mobility and protect workers' rights. Former African head of state called for peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
On the sidelines of the 34th Arab League Summit in Baghdad, Iraq, the president of the AU Commission, Mahmoud Ali Youssuff, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Ahmed Abdul Gate, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, discussed the situation in Sudan on the 17th of May 2025. They expressed their on the sidelines of the 34th Arab League Summit in Baghdad, Iraq, the president of the AU Commission, Mahmoud Ali Youssuff, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Ahmed Abdul Gate, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, discussed the situation in Sudan on the 17th of May 2025. They expressed their deep concern at the worsening conflict and humanitarian crisis in Sudan, calling for urgent international action to end the violence, guarantee humanitarian access, and support a sustainable ceasefire. The three leaders also agreed to continue to coordinate efforts for a peaceful resolution of the conflict and reaffirmed their commitment to the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Sudan. The Economic Community of West African States, in partnership with the African Union Commission, the International Organization of Migration and the International Labour Organization officially validated its labour migration strategy and action plan on the 13th of May 2025, marking a key step towards more coordinated and rights-based governance of labour mobility in the region. The strategy comes as West Africa hosts around 3.7 million international migrant workers in key sectors such as agriculture, construction, domestic work, and services. The new ECOWAS strategy responds to urgent challenges such as irregular migration, limited social protection, and gender disparities in migration governance. As part of the panel of facilitators appointed by the East African Community and the Southern African Development Community to try to find a peaceful solution to the ongoing conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, several former African heads of state met from the 17th to the 18th of May 2025 in Lomé, Togo. Organized at the initiative of Faure Esozimna Ngasimbe, President of Togo's Council of Ministers and mediator on behalf of the African Union, the meeting aimed to strengthen mediation efforts by bringing together experienced figures from the continent's 5 regions in accordance with the decision of the joint East African Community and the Southern African Development Community Summit of the 24th of March 2025. The initiative is part of ongoing international efforts to stabilize the Great Lakes region, marked in particular by the signing of a joint declaration in Doha at the beginning of May 2025 between representatives of the United States, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Togo, Qatar, and France.
Over the last 20 years, China has become sub-Saharan Africa's largest trading partner. Recognizing its status as a major player in the African economy, the African Union organized the People-to-People Dialogue in partnership with the Chinese NGO Network for International Exchanges. This initiative aims to foster greater mutual understanding and practical collaboration between Africans and the Chinese people. More details in these reports.
The relationship between China and the African continent has been ripening over the years. A recent deceleration of economic growth means they will now need to take a more prudent approach if they want to maintain future trade relation and investment flows. It is in this line that the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, in collaboration with China NGO Network for International Exchanges, organized a 2-day dialogue bringing together civil society organizations from Africa and China, as well as the business community and the academia, to foster friendship, cultural exchange, and sustainable development.
ECOSOC is ready to rally the voices of the African citizenry, be it for the C20, the B20, or the T20. ECOSOC is ready to learn, but also join forces with Chinese think tanks to lead its support to Africa's G20 presidency. Let me conclude with this. Today's conversation will be wide-ranging, yet each one returns to one simple, powerful principle, that we are stronger together when every voice is heard.
The platform was also meant to promote participatory dialogue, collaboration, and knowledge sharing between communities as part of efforts to build a more people-centered Africa-China partnership. At the same time, China has also emerged as the largest bilateral creditor to Africa, providing African countries with a new source of infrastructure, mining, and energy financing. China's share of total sub-Saharan African external public debt was less than 2% before 2005, but grew to about 17%, or $134 billion by 2021.
China and Africa have always stood together through thick and thin, and we are true partners in win-win cooperation. Our mutual achievements and shared development vividly demonstrate the solidarity and collaboration of the Global South.
The new commitments signify a shift away from direct infrastructure financing towards trade credit for regional exports, while promoting an increase in private investment.
Our partnership has strengthened and was anchored in the principles of equality, solidarity, shared prosperity, and a common vision for a more just and better global order. When African and Chinese civil societies come together, they unleash a powerful force for transformative change.
According to experts, better coordination and synergy would guarantee mutual benefits and sustainable growth for Africa and China. To realize this immense potential, the two regions must give priority to greater coordination between the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Belt and Road Initiative, a Chinese project aimed at improving communication links and cooperation on a transcontinental scale.
The 11th Forum of the African Union Commission on International Law (QUADI) will be held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia from May 22nd to 23rd, 2025. Under the theme International Law, WTO Reform and Implementation of the FTEA, the 11th QUADI Forum aims to contribute to the legal definition and articulation of African expectations and proposals in the context of the major debate on WTO reform, bearing in mind the advent of the FTEA and its beginnings of effective operation. The forum is intended to provide an opportunity for brainstorming and strategy making among the various stakeholders, including academics and researchers, and international trade law, national trade policy negotiators, FTA stakeholders, trade policy officials from the African regional economic communities, and AU legal and trade officials. The city of Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe will be hosting the SADC Statistics Committee meeting from May 27 to 29, 2025. Organized by the Secretariat of the Southern African Development Community (SADC), the aim of this meeting is to improve the quality, availability, and use of statistics in the SADC region in order to support evidence-based decision-making, policy development, and regional integration. The 4th African Media Convention will be held in Marrakech, Morocco from May 29 to 31st, 2025. It will bring together the continent's most influential media voices to tackle one of the most pressing issues of our time, artificial intelligence and its impact on African journalism. Organized as part of the commemoration of World Press Freedom Day, this edition will provide an essential platform for journalists, policymakers, technology innovators, and civil society leaders to explore how AI is transforming press freedom, access to information, and media sustainability in Africa. Under the theme AI Press Freedom and Access to Information Shaping the Future of African Media, the 4th African Media Convention promises stimulating discussions, concrete strategies, and innovative collaborations.
Omar Alieu Touray is a career diplomat and development expert who distinguished himself for many years as the Gambia's ambassador and permanent representative to the African Union. Proud to becoming president of ECOWAS, he spent most of his career representing his country within key African regional organizations such as ECOWAS and the African Union. A portrait by Nana Kamsu Com.
Omar Alieu Touray, a diplomat at the service of regional integration, President of the ECOWAS Commission since 2022, Omar Alieu Touray embodies Gambia's diplomatic experience and commitment on the African and international scene. Before taking up his key position, he represented his country at the United Nations from 2007 to 2008 after serving as ambassador to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the African Union between 2002 and 2007. His career has been devoted to regional cooperation and international dialogue.
Notre continent reste confronté à de nombreux défis.
Our continent continues to face many challenges. It has to be said that these challenges are far beyond the capacity of individual countries, whether in terms of inclusive development, the fight against terrorism, conflict, climate change, or women's and children's rights.
Du changement climatique ou encore des droits des femmes et des enfants.
With his wealth of diplomatic experience, Omar Alieu Touray actively promotes regional integration and development in West Africa. Reacting to the announcement that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger would withdraw from the bloc in January 2025, he warned of the consequences of such a decision, warning that splitting the ESA could lead to a disintegration of the bloc with major economic and security costs for the region.
In addition to the many threats to peace and security and the challenges of poverty, our region also faces the risk of disintegration.
au risque de désintégration.
Alieu Touray, at the head of ECOWAS, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary on May 28, 2025, is continuing to put in place initiatives aimed at integration, the promotion of youth entrepreneurship and innovation. The African Forum for Research and Innovation held currently in Cotonou, Benin, is a perfect illustration for this.
Il nous appartient de tout mettre en œuvre.
It is up to us to do everything we can to encourage our young people's creativity and hope for innovation. It is with this in mind that the theme of this year's event is African Youth, Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Building a Sustainable Future.
Bâtir un avenir durable.
Omar Alieu Touray, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Gambia, is a seasoned diplomat. At age 59, he already has a long and rich career in the service of diplomacy and international cooperation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this edition of the African Union Journal. Stay tuned to Africa 24 English for the best African news in streaming and replay on our website, africa24tv.com, and on all our social networks.
On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afrexim Bank.